Hello and welcome to the People First Productivity Solutions Deb Calvert channel on Bright Talk. I'm Deb Calvert and I am really delighted that you could be here today. We are going to be covering a lot of ground and I won't be able to go in depth into every part of today's topic, which is why I've loaded up the attachments, the bonus content. You'll find that over there in the Attachments and Links tab. I hope that you'll also subscribe to this channel because there are many previous on-demand webinars that are available to you, and you can drill down into any part of the topic that you feel like you'd like to get a little bit more in depth on. For those who are new to Bright Talk, I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, if you have any issues at all, click on the orange button that says Get Live Support Now because Bright Talk folks will be able to take care of you right away. I mentioned the Attachments and Links tab. It's pretty high value. It's one of the things I like best about Bright Talk. And one of the first things you may want to jump in there and grab are the slides from today's presentation. I've given you a PDF of those in case you want to see them and take notes along the way as I'm presenting. I've got a lot of information packed in, including some slides that are charts with quite a bit on screen that you won't be able to capture all at once as I give it a quick overview. The other attachments, I'll mention them as they're relevant throughout our conversation. Two other things about the platform. We're going to be using a polling feature today, and I'd really love to hear your answers when we get to that in just a moment. I always am eager to hear your questions, and so go ahead and type those in for me, and I'll answer them as they make sense in the sequence of our presentation. I don't always wait until the end to take all the questions at once. And something that I greatly appreciate from you, at the end of the presentation, if you could please, go ahead and post a review. It helps me to know what's on target, what's not on target, what I can do differently in the future, as I do try to make presentations once a month for HR and management folks in businesses. So just a little bit about me now on screen. I hope that you'll connect with me on LinkedIn, that you'll subscribe to this channel, that you'll visit my website, and that we can be in touch. Next month's presentation will be about a topic that is not one that we see all that often, but it's extremely important. I've titled it Soft Skills Are Hard, and so if you are managing people or if you work in people development in any way, this will be about how and why to nurture soft skills in your organization. Okay, now I mentioned that we were going to take a poll, and this is going to help me in terms of setting up the rest of today's topic, but it also is just going to give me a little insight into all the people who are attending here today. What I'd like you to consider is your own personal preference. The same answer responses are going to be available in the poll in just a moment. I'll give you about a minute to make your choice, but I'd like you to think about your own personal preference. Don't worry about people you manage or expectations of your organization. This is just about you. And I realize you might like more than one of those responses. You might have multiple preferences showing up on that list, but I'd like you to pick the one that would be your top priority of a preference, the one that you would like to have more than any other. And I've opened up the voting now here for you. I'm going to keep this open for a full minute. I would like for everyone to pick an answer, and then we'll see what the full group has voted on. By the way, there are no right or wrong answers. This is just about your own preference. We've got about 30 seconds left. I'm waiting for everybody to have a chance to get in here and vote. I'm counting you down. Last call, just about 15 seconds to respond, and I am looking for everyone to participate, please. Okay, 3, 2, 1. If you haven't voted, do it now, because I'm going to stop the voting and display the results. And what you now see, let's see here. That poll did not close. We might have a little technical issue here. That poll did not close. It's still open. Well, I'll tell you what it says as you're getting a second chance to vote. I don't want to stack the deck and influence anyone's vote. I'm not sure why it didn't close. But what you're going to see here, if you can see the results, is that the #1 choice out of the people in this group was the second choice. Knows and values me as an individual, as more than a worker bee. That one got nearly half of the votes from the people attending this presentation live. And if you're someone attending on demand, you might look to see how your vote stacks up to the people who attended live. That one was #1. Right behind it, the second most popular choice was takes time to give me useful feedback and is invested in my success. So those two responses were the most popular ones in response to the question, I want to work for a manager who. The least popular choice was leaves me alone to do my work the way I want to do it. But a couple of people did choose that. It's not that it's not a choice. Also, small numbers on follows the rules, abides by policies, treats everyone the same, and is an expert in our field who always has answers to my questions. But those last three, if I add them up, that was 12% of our vote. And the other two got all the other votes. Now, what that means is that what we typically think of in a manager is not exactly what you voted for. You voted for something different. And I know that was hard to answer. You'd like to have all of those things, but I was forcing you to prioritize because I wanted to draw out a really important point. And I'm going to make that point by giving you a little context in terms of definitions. The word manage, its root word, manage, means to handle, just like mano, hand, in Spanish is coming from that same root word. Managing things means that you handle them. It's usually short term. You get things done that need to be done right now. The word supervise actually shares its root word with overseeing. So if you think about micromanaging, or if you think about even more unpleasantly the word overseer, it all comes out of the same root word, and it has some of those same implications that are a little negative, unfortunately. Those weren't the answers that most of you chose. You didn't pick the ones that sounded a little bit more like micromanaging or hands-off entirely. You do want people to be involved with you. The choices you made, numbers or letters B and E, are more likely to be associated with leadership. And the word lead means to guide, to take somebody to a place where they haven't been before, to help them to realize their full potential, to see them as an individual, and to tailor your responses in ways that are useful for them. So that's all sort of in the realm of leadership. And what that means is that to be the manager that everyone wants to work for, in a way, you need to think of yourself not so much as those old antiquated ideas of supervisors and managers, but as a leader. And I know there's a lot more to it than those preferences you selected might convey at first glance. In fact, I've just now put up for you 10 basic supervisory skills that new managers must learn. And there's a lot on this list. Don't forget, if you came in a little late, in the attachments, I've given you copies of these slides so that you don't have to take fast and furious notes here. But these 10 basic supervisory skills that managers, new or not, need to know are engaging people in ways that help them to see the manager in a positive light, to see themselves in a positive light where they can unleash their full potential and make the maximum contribution to the work that they do. Let me tell you why this matters so much. Mastering all 10 of these basic supervisory skills matters greatly. Let me give you 2 pieces of data to back it up. HR Drive survey found that 75% of employee turnover is preventable through the direct supervisor. And Spherian had some research that said 78% of employers are worried about a talent shortage but do not take actions like training supervisors to prevent turnover. So we could be preventing turnover in your organization. You could be retaining more of the people you'd like to retain. Employers are worried about that, but at the very same time, they aren't taking actions like training supervisors in the critical ways that you see on screen. Now, of course, we can't, and I won't even try to cover all of this today, but I'm going to point you to some resources that will build on everything that we do cover. My aim is to help you think about the role of managing and the foundation needed to be an effective supervisor who also effectively leads and inspires and engages others. So toward that end, one of the most important things to know is this. The number one reason that employees give for quitting is that they didn't feel valued or empowered by their supervisor. Just like the choices that you made in our poll for preferring a manager who knows you and a manager who gives you feedback. And the funny thing is, it's not even in your job description as a manager, but it's critically important to value and empower people. And if I were to say this another way, I would introduce two words to you. The first is ennoblement, because everyone, no matter what answer you chose, everyone wants to work for a supervisor who ennobles them, a person who makes them feel worthy or important in the work that they do. And by the way, that's a real word. I didn't make it up. It's just not one that we use all that often, unfortunately. You've probably heard its opposite. The opposite of ennoble is ignoble, which is to make someone feel unworthy or unimportant. And accidentally, sometimes that happens in workplaces. So we should all strive, if we want to be that supervisor who everybody wants to work for, we should be striving to ennoble other people. And hand in hand in that, when people are ennobled, when employees feel worthy or important, they're more likely to be followers. They're more likely to appreciate and want your leadership, and they're more likely to be highly engaged in the work that they do. So I've got another definition there for you, and that is a buzzword sometimes we hear, right? Employee engagement. But what it really means is, from the CEB, it means the emotional connection that an employee feels with the organization that causes them to apply additional discretionary effort. Two pieces to that. The heightened emotional connection is the first piece, and that heightened emotional connection leads to some pretty great stuff. There's a domino effect here. When an employee is engaged, they tend to stick around longer. That's where retention comes from. And when they have an emotional connection, they're going to then, the second part of our definition, they're going to apply additional discretionary effort to their work. And when they apply additional discretionary effort, that's what unlocks the next pieces in the puzzle. That's where you get increased levels of productivity. People apply additional discretionary effort. They work harder. They do more in a period of time. They do it better. They are invested in it. They care about the work. You get better quantity and quality outputs. And because you've got employees who are sticking around, they care about the work, you have higher productivity levels. Of course, the next natural outcome is that you have customers who are more satisfied. You get increases in customer satisfaction. And the then natural outcome of all of that is both top-line revenue growth and bottom-line higher levels of profitability. One reason that you get better profitability is that you're cutting expenses. Higher productivity means fewer hours on overtime. It means less waste. It means that you're not having to spend as much money on sourcing and recruiting and hiring and onboarding new employees. So you're saving money at the same time that you're growing top-line revenue. Now, of course, everything I'm describing, all the research around this, and there's quite a bit of it, it all is pre-COVID-19. I think there might be some changes here that are going to come from the new normal or the next normal, but I don't anticipate there being significantly different outcomes. I think it's still going to be true that when you engage employees, you will still have all of the outcomes that I'm describing there, which does beg the question. You'll notice that I started at the second puzzle piece. If you're wondering what it is then that boosts employee engagement to get all of those other benefits I've described, well, the number one thing, more than anything else, that contributes to employee engagement is the behavior of a supervisor. And supervisors who do the very best job, managers who do the best job with employee engagement, are those who have been developed as leaders. More than any other factor, in fact, 37% of engagement is accounted for by the behavior of the person you report to. And if you'd like to learn more about all that research and how these puzzle pieces fit together, I'm going to recommend a nice little book to you called Great Leadership Creates Great Workplaces. That's written by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. It's really fascinating stuff. Okay, now, if you're wondering, because you've come into this conversation with me about how you can be the manager that everyone wants to work for, but if you're wondering, how do you do that when the people above you, when the culture of the organization, or when the proverbial powers that be are fueling something else? They're modeling something else. They are setting a tone that's different from what we've described here. They are not leading in the ways that I'll be describing here in just a moment. If you're wondering, what do you do to manage others when that's the environment that you're in, hang on, because I'm going to answer that question as we proceed. And I know it happens. It's unfortunate. So now leaders, and that, when I use that term, I also mean managers and supervisors who choose to develop themselves and take actions as leaders no matter what the environment. What leaders do is they guide, they inspire, they enable, and they engage people. Leaders have followers. Leaders, by the way, we've just seen here, have stronger business performance by every possible measure. So engagement is pretty important, and that's why I've given you a couple of attachments, another webinar on this channel that you can go to. Oh, and also a nice little tool. It's free. It's a daily checklist tool, simple things you could be doing every day that would heighten the levels of employee engagement on your team or in your organization. But there's one more thing I need to say about this whole idea of employee engagement, because I know some of you have had a reaction to the word in the definition. That definition was a heightened emotional connection an employee feels toward their organization. And that word emotional is not accidental. It's important. And this is why soft skills are not optional. It's why my June presentation to you will be about soft skills. I hope you'll sign up for that one. But it is about the emotion. And emotions often get overlooked. But what I've got for you on screen now shows you why it's so important. And here again, how a manager's choices, a manager's attributes, contribute so much to the commitment level of employees in the organization. And it takes soft skills to build emotional connections. If you're over-relying on your technical proficiency and ignoring soft skills, you might not be putting yourself in that position where people do want you to be their manager, where they do feel comfortable following you. So you're missing out on some of that emotional commitment that then gets people to apply additional discretionary effort. So these pieces all fit together, and it is the emotional commitment that matters more than anything else. Emotional commitment starts with soft skills from supervisors. And I'll say no more about that next month. Come on back for that one. But I would want to take a tangent now. Let me bear with me for just a moment. There are a lot of people attending right now who are from HR or learning and development functions. I want to speak to them for just a moment. Supervisor skills with a leadership development emphasis packaged together is where you're going to get the best return on investment for your training dollars. By far, the very best. There's a tremendous business case that we could make for this, and I've made that in some other webinars on this channel. There's data to back up all 10 of the bullet points I've just given you here as we're taking this tangent. For example, Gallup found that companies that increase their number of talented managers and double the rate of engaged employees achieve, on average, 140% higher earnings per share than their competition. And I've given you a lot of data. It's compiled in the attachment called the Ultimate Guide to Employee Engagement Statistics. It's actually 98 pages of statistics to back up every aspect of employee engagement and leadership development. So if you're someone who needs that sort of data to make the business case to senior leadership in your organization, or to help people see why making a change to manage and create culture that's more like what I'm describing, that'll be a good tool. And I'll help you get through it if you want to give me an email, and we'll talk about how to use that. Okay, now back to supervisors. I just wanted to make sure we covered the folks who aren't directly supervising or thinking of their own situation, but looking more holistically at the organization. But back to supervisors. I want to break this down because I've given you so much already. I want to break this down into more manageable chunks. And we're still thinking about all those benefits that I showed you from employee engagement. I still want you to be thinking long-term about all the skills that you could build. But I've broken it down into 5 categories, really 4 categories, but I wanted to do a subset because it's so important. And if you'll focus on one of these, it will help you to accelerate your success as a supervisor. But a word of caution, because I'm not going to let you go to the easiest 2. For a lot of supervisors, going straight to technical skills is tempting. After all, as a frontline contributor, this is how you earned your keep. It's how you proved your value. Your superior technical skills have earned you raises and rave reviews, and may even be what led to your promotion into management. But if you're still relying exclusively on your technical skills, you're going to hit, or maybe you've already hit, a roadblock in your career. So I'm giving you a word of caution. Although your technical skills matter greatly, they may not be sufficient to earn you the next level, or to get you to that place where you are the manager that everyone wants to work for. It's because there are some other pieces of this puzzle that you need to put in together. And the same thing is true with the one that's up there, setting expectations and managing performance. You don't want to over-rely on that one either. It's important, and maybe you need skills in that area. And if so, I don't want to exclude you from going out and pursuing those, and I'll give you a little information about that in a moment. But my point is, don't over-rely on this area. It's an easier one than some of the others here. But if you do over-rely on policy or metrics, you're going to end up micromanaging people. You're going to depersonalize instead of thinking about individuals. And you're going to alienate folks if you inadvertently do that. So these are tools to use, your technical skills and the managerial skills of managing performance, of setting expectations. They're important, but they must be in balance with the other 3 items that you see on screen. People skills, or soft skills, is a great big umbrella. There's a lot encompassed within that, which is why, if you just came in, and several of you have, I want to point out that next month there's another whole topic on soft skills. Come on back for that one. But this is something that matters more now as you are entering into supervisory or managerial positions, as you continue to ascend in the organization. The soft skills are going to matter much more than the technical skills. The people skills, the ability to grow other people, to connect with other people. And I broke it out separately, to communicate effectively with other people. These are going to matter significantly more than they ever have before, especially in times like we're in right now, when there's uncertainty. and when people are experiencing change. And there's ambiguity because we've never been in a situation like this before. More than ever, people are turning to the managers and supervisors they report to for answers and for empathy. So soft skills and communication, more important than they've ever been. And last but not least, perhaps the most important item up here of all, the one that's not taught in business school, the one that you seldom see emphasized in workplaces and you don't see it all that often in job descriptions for managers, is people development. To ennoble, engage, and retain people, to sustain growth, you have to develop people. And what I want to do next for you is I want to illustrate how it looks when supervisors rely on traditional managerial skills versus using soft skills and people development or a leadership approach. So this is a lot of information here that I'm hoping to get to. I've got my slides out of order. I'll illustrate it for you in just a moment as opposed to going all over the place. Let me come right back to that for you. But when you see the contrast, you're going to see how all these pieces fit together here. To make it all happen, you've got to put these pieces together. And I'm going to start with setting expectations, because this is process-oriented in many organizations. And when it's process-oriented, it leaves out some pretty important pieces. So process-oriented, what I mean by that is we have an annual review process. In the annual review, we tell people how they are or are not living up to our expectations. We ask them to set goals. We then break those into SMART goals, and so people have a blueprint of what they're supposed to do in the coming quarter or year, whatever your time frame is. As people come into the organization, we give them a job description, we onboard them, we tell them what to do and how to do it. And that is all good. It's just that it's not enough. And so if you've got people who are underperforming, and when I say that, I don't just mean they're not getting the job done, I mean they're not reaching their full potential. They're not highly engaged and accessing that additional discretionary effort. So underperforming, I've got a pretty high standard for what top performance looks like, and I mean anything that falls short of that, including if people aren't growing. What you see on screen are the reasons that people underperform. And it's not just that you told them what to do. And it's not just that you showed them how to do it. You'll see that there's a lot more here. People need to know how much that you expect from them. What's the volume and the frequency? Explain to me the quality. They need all of those details. They need examples of what it looks like, not at bare minimum, but at best, highest, top performance. And they need to have feedback. If they're not doing it correctly, they need someone to come alongside them and coach them and help them and be invested in their abilities to get whatever they need to perform at a higher level. And they need to know why they should do it your way, because maybe they have a better way, or maybe they have a perception that their way is better. So you've got to take all of that into account and spend time with individuals if they're underperforming to examine it from all these angles. Don't miss the last few items here. They also need context. They need to know why. It's not just that there's a punishment, but there's a purpose. There's a reason why you've asked them to do things a certain way. And yes, the last one is sometimes true. Maybe they just don't like the work and they don't want to do the work. And if there's no negative consequence, then they can duck or dodge the work. So you've got to be careful what you're reinforcing as well. I just want to give you an example here. This is a real example. It comes from an assembly line in a factory. A manager, as he breezes through every few hours, what he tends to praise in that particular assembly line is people who are working fast and getting a high level of production. In fact, he offers bonuses to individuals who exceed their quota on the line. So people are always working faster. They're always trying very hard to increase output. And the problem is that that particular unit of the business has extremely low levels of quality. Ultimately, that manager was taken out of the role. And it's unfair because expectations were not properly set for him. He was not properly setting expectations for the team that quality output was, in fact, the priority over quantity. So you've got to get all your systems lined up and not send mixed messages when you set expectations. Now, what I'm describing, it involves more than delivering a message just one time. I frequently hear people say, when I ask them about expectations, that they often say, well, yeah, but I don't want to sound like a broken record. In management roles, we sometimes think that because we made a pronouncement, we said something once, that should be sufficient, and it's not. Communication is not delivering a message. Communication is making sure that the message you sent was accurately received and understood by the recipient. And there's a lot of interference that happens. The receiver has questions. You go back and forth in communication. Things interfere because there are mixed messages, or there are misunderstandings, or there are disruptions to that message. So it takes more than simply delivering it. Context matters. Your intent matters. And you've got to frame it up so you're keeping all of that in mind. And yes, you probably guessed that there's a whole other webinar on this topic if you want to go deeper into it. And when I say context and intent, it brings us full circle back to this, to people development. What I'm showing you here comes from a good little book called Journey to the Emerald City. But what it's attempting to illustrate is that when you're operating in the realm of managing and supervising, what you're probably focusing on are the results. You're telling people the outcomes that you want, whether that's quality or quantity or some sort of work product. And hopefully you're also going down to the next layer. You're describing for them or setting expectations or giving metrics that measure their actions. So you want the result, and you want them to choose the behaviors, the actions that drive that result. And you're coaching them so that they can get better and better at those actions. That's all in the realm of management, and that's excellent. It's important, but once again, it's not enough. It's not enough for being the manager that everybody wants to work for. It's not enough for giving people what they really want, which is leadership. Because, you know, as soon as you look away, sometimes people choose different actions. They don't always keep doing what you want them to be doing. Ultimately, more than you, what drives their actions are their own beliefs. And if they believe there's a better way, if they believe they don't really have to work that hard, if they believe that you're out of touch because you've been in management for a long time and you don't have to deal with the things they have to deal with, if they have any beliefs that don't align with what you're asking them to do, their beliefs will override your requests. Leaders know this, and leaders work to understand what people believe, individuals, and they work to shape those beliefs so that people will choose the actions that drive results. And what that requires is getting all the way down to experiences. You see, our beliefs are formed by our experiences. If you reward somebody for high quantity, but you ignore the fact that my quality is superior, my experience now says you don't care about me, you don't pay attention to me, and all I should do is crank out quantity and not be concerned with quality. So you have to be very careful and thoughtful, very deliberate, so that the experiences you create shape the beliefs that drive the actions that lead to results. This is what leaders do. and it takes time, and it gets down to a level of individual, not just group, not just corporate, and it takes a lot of different skills than the ones you may have been rewarded for in the past, your technical skills. And here's why it's worth it. It's worth it because the best leaders, and everything I've been describing around beliefs and experiences, around guiding people, right, that's leadership. The best leaders elicit 3 times the amount of talent, energy, commitment, and motivation compared to their counterparts. But having said all that, I also don't want you to think that your technical skills are unimportant, but I do want to remind you that there's only so much that you as an individual can do. So if you're a supervisor who has relied heavily on technical skills and you're trying to be the role model to other people, or the person who dons their superhero cape and swoops in to save the day by doing things that the folks on the front line are supposed to do, please remember that you're just one person, and scalable growth comes not from your technical skills, but from empowering and building other people, being able to lead them, to teach them, to coach them so that they develop high levels of technical skills too. Now, I promised you a moment ago that I'd show you what this all looks like in practice, and finally we got to it. What I'm showing you are situations that are quite common in any workplace, and ineffective responses are coming from the drivers we talked about earlier, policy or good technical skills, the ones that aren't focused on people building and on what people really want from their managers. Those are over in the right-hand column. So you'd read this row by row. The first row, for example, the situation there is that there's a lot of burnout. Employees are feeling overloaded. For a lot of you who are in certain types of roles right now where the work is essential, you probably are experiencing this. You could, with your superior technical skills, you could take some work off their plate and just do it yourself. But that would take away from the time that you would otherwise be spending coaching and developing and preparing people to expand their own capacity. And this represents a choice. You'll have to decide based on your current circumstances, based on the people that are working with you, based on the needs long-term of your organization. I want to point out, though, that there is a choice, and there are better responses when the time is right and the situation allows it. You've got to go for the one that builds people. The second row represents a situation where we've got policy and intervention potentially overriding what you could do, the other choice you could make that would create more autonomy and ennoblement for people. So you're going to take the slides, you'll look at this and see what choices you could be making that are different. To choose better responses, people have to have clear expectations, right? You can't expect them to respond to your right-hand column choices unless they have good communication about expectations that you've set. Now you might be asking, right, how do I really do all this? How do I get people motivated to be able to do what you're describing? And so I want to spend a moment on that. Ennobling people in and of itself is motivating. Many of you said at the beginning in our poll, for those who were here at the time, you said that you would prefer to work for managers who know you and value you as unique individuals, and managers who take time to give you useful feedback and are invested in your success. Those ennobling behaviors of a leader in and of themselves can be more motivating for employees. But take a look at what I'm showing you on screen here too. This is really 4 choices of how you can motivate people. 2 of them are extrinsic. They come from outside the individual. The other 2 are intrinsic. They come from inside the individual. And then you have positive and motivations and negative motivations, carrots and sticks in each one. The difference is this. When you are extrinsically motivating somebody with positives like a raise or with punishments like a demotion, those extrinsics, those are known as lighting a fire underneath someone. Intrinsic, when you really get to know a person and you know why they're working and what their life goals are and the things that cause them to feel ennobled. When you know that intrinsically, instead of lighting a fire under someone, you have the ability to ignite a spark and fan the flames that are already inside them. That's going to last a lot longer. It's going to burn a lot brighter than anything you can do extrinsically. But to do that, you have to get to know people. In fact, you have to put people first. The name of my company, by the way, in full disclosure, is People First Productivity Solutions. So this is the work that we do. And this is what it looks like when you put people first in your organization, and I'm talking even before profit, certainly before processes, programs, policies, because people are what it takes. People are what will ultimately drive the profit and the business success that you have. You can measure your organization by looking at typical situations that occur and by looking at the responses that happen within the organization. You can use this as a self-assessment for what you do or as an organizational assessment. Let's say you've got somebody in the first row who's going to be retiring. In fact, you've got several executives who will be retiring in the next few years. A people-focused organization has been giving people cross-functional experience. They've been developing those high-potential directors and managers. They've been mentoring and coaching them in the soft skills to help them prepare for ascension into those senior roles. A profit-driven organization, that they've been saving the pennies. They haven't been focused on internal development, and they're probably going to use an executive search firm to go out and find external candidates. An organization that focuses more on programs and policies, well, this has all been delegated, all of succession management. It's been delegated to HR, and HR has been using a 9-box model to label people as high performance, high potential, and doing certain things, monitoring the reviews of certain people. It's all very hierarchical and structured. And whatever's going on in your organization, it's an indicator of what your values are, of what really matters to you as an organization. This is what you are signaling to people. From that stems how ennobled do people feel, how engaged are they, and what's the likely outcome going to be in terms of how they view management of the organization. The third row might be a little more familiar to some of you who are attending this. You've been promoted to supervisor. What happened next gives you an indication of what comes first in your organization. Now, last but not least, in case your company isn't putting people first, but you want to, let me just give you some tips about what not to do. What not to do if you want to be an effective manager even in that type of an environment. What you see here, we've all been there, and you might be there right now. We've all seen these command and control styles of management. And at some point, we've probably all had negative reactions to that style of management. We've seen diminished engagement. We've experienced feelings of being disempowered or marginalized. We've held back because we don't feel fully invested in the organization because it doesn't seem like they're fully invested in us. We just have a transactional relationship. I do the work, you give me a paycheck, that's it. But you get to make a choice. Instead of command and control, you can consider heart and soul as a style of leading. You can build people. You can guide them as a leader to unleash their full potential. It's possible. It happens. People do this even in the worst of environments. And I've given you some slides, those ones that had all the tables on them. Those are all choices. They're examples of choices that you can make. Speaking of choices, there's something a little extra I'd like to ask you to do for me today. I'd like you to do this right now before you leave, because we've covered so much information today. This was like a survey course, and you have to do a deeper dive to all the different pieces of what we've talked about. But this is about behavior change. So I'd like you in the question box. I'd like you to think about being that manager that everyone wants to work for. And if you could take just one small behavioral change, one little thing that you could do differently to improve employee engagement and ennoblement, what would that one little thing be? And type it for me into the question box. I am going to use that to think about future topics for webinars and places where I might go into greater detail. I might, if there's anything there that I can help you with, I might point you towards some other resources. But please go ahead and type that in before you leave. When you do leave, don't forget to download other attachments. There's an ebook with information. There's information about our management training course, which is available in virtual format, same space format, and there's an e-learning version you can access as an individual too. We provide one-to-one coaching. We work with a lot of managers who are experiencing this desire to improve their own management skills and approach. So you're typing answers in for me. Keep those coming. Don't forget to leave me a review after you're all finished up here on this slide, and keep working, because it is possible. You can be that manager that you want to be, the one that everybody wants to work for. It always only boils down to the choices that you make. I'm going to say goodbye, but I'm going to keep the screen open so you can continue sending me. I really am loving all these items that you're sending me, your one little micro commitment that you're making, the one thing that you'll do to become a better, stronger manager. I'm Deb Calvert. Thanks very much for your time today.